Have you ever spent top dollar on the absolute liveliest minnows in the bait shop, only to sit by the cold lake for 10 hours without a single bite? What if I told you that having perfectly energetic bait is the exact reason you are failing to catch fish? Today we are talking about the biggest mistake you can make when using live bait for tired spring predators. I promise you are going to discover a completely unexpected truth about how fish actually hunt in cold water. We are going to reveal the exact reason why your bobber never goes under, even when you know the giant fish are sitting right there. Before we dive deep into this crazy secret, I have a provocative question for you to answer. Do you honestly believe that a faster, crazier, splashing minnow always catches more fish? Let me know your honest opinion in the comments right now, because we are about to completely destroy that old idea. This topic is absolutely crucial for any fisherman who wants to catch big predators during the early spring months. For many decades, we have been totally brainwashed by a very stubborn and old-school belief. We have been taught that frantic movement is the ultimate key to fishing success. Older fishermen always drilled it into our heads that if a piece of bait is not kicking, splashing, and fighting violently for its life, it is totally useless garbage. Because of this deeply ingrained habit, millions of anglers do the exact same thing year after year. They buy the most hyperactive bait they can possibly find, they cast it out into the freezing water, and they go home completely empty-handed. They blame the weather, they blame the lake pressure, and they blame bad luck. But they never stop to think about the simple physics of cold water and tired fish. It is time to step back, look at the actual science of predator behavior, and stop repeating the same frustrating mistakes every single spring. Setting the cold morning scene. Picture this scene for a moment. You are standing on the shore very early in the morning. A thick white mist is slowly rolling over the surface of the freezing lake. Your hands are shivering inside your heavy coat pockets. You just bought a bucket of the most active minnows from your favorite local bait shop. You hook one on the line. It kicks and splashes like absolute crazy in your hand. You cast it out with total confidence. You just know you are going to catch a monster today. But 1 hour goes by. Then 2 hours go by. Absolutely nothing happens. Not a single bite. You reel your line back in. Your bait is still swimming a marathon at the end of your hook. You probably start thinking there are simply no fish around this spot. But what if the fish are right there? What if they are looking directly at your perfect bait? The problem is not your location. The problem is that your bait is entirely too lively. Yes, you heard me correctly. Your bait is simply swimming way too fast for the fish to catch it. Those tired spring predators are not interested in a track meet right now. They are completely exhausted. Understanding the biological reality. Let us talk about the real biological facts of these spring predators. You have to remember that fish are completely cold-blooded creatures. This means their internal body temperature matches the exact temperature of the water around them. In the early spring, the water is still incredibly cold. Sometimes the heavy ice has just melted a few days ago. Because the water is so freezing, the metabolism of the fish slows way down. They simply do not have the physical energy to swim fast. Their massive muscles are stiff and incredibly lethargic. Think about how you feel when you step outside into the freezing cold without a heavy winter jacket. You do not want to go running a marathon. You want to curl up and conserve your precious energy. The fish feel the exact same way. They desperately want to eat, but they need the meal to be extremely easy to catch. If a predator sees a target zooming past them at top speed, their brain does a very quick calculation. They ask themselves if the calories gained from eating that minnow will make up for the calories burned trying to chase it down. In the early spring, the answer is almost always no. Falling into the bait shop trap. We all fall into the exact same psychological trap every single season at the local bait shop. You walk through the front doors. You look down into the big bubbling aerator tanks. You tell the guy behind the counter to give you a couple dozen of the best minnows. You watch closely as he dips his green net into the water. You secretly hope he scoops up the ones that are darting around like little lightning bolts. In our minds, movement equals life, and life equals a guaranteed bite. We are totally conditioned to believe that a Frantic bait is a premium bait. If we see a few slow or lazy minnows floating near the bottom of the bucket, we get really annoyed. We think we got a bad batch. We might even throw those lazy ones away before we start fishing. But this is a massive mental mistake during the early season. We are bringing high-energy summer tactics into a low-energy spring environment. The very thing that makes us think a bait is perfect is the exact same thing that makes it completely useless to a tired predator. We are essentially paying good money to scare the big fish away. Busting Grandpa's golden rule. It is finally time to totally bust one of the biggest fishing myths out there. We like to call it the golden rule of Grandpa. For many generations, older fishermen have sworn by the idea that hyperactive bait is the ultimate secret weapon. They would tell you to constantly change your bait every 15 minutes just to keep the maximum amount of kicking and thrashing on your line. They firmly believed the frantic vibrations called fish in from miles away. But here is the tough truth. Grandpa was actually wrong about early spring fishing. That hyperactive vibration is certainly loud, but to a very tired predator, it is completely obnoxious. It is not an inviting dinner bell. It is more like an annoying car alarm going off right next to their bed. It is overwhelming and visually confusing. A massive pike or a giant walleye does not want to deal with a chaotic, unpredictable target when they are barely awake. They want a slow, steady, and predictable rhythm. By forcing the most energetic bait into their territory, you are breaking the natural rules of the underwater food chain. Viewing the underwater perspective. Let us take a moment to deeply imagine the scene from an underwater perspective. Imagine you are a big, lazy, post-spawn northern pike. You are resting near a deep drop-off, just trying to recover your lost strength. The water is freezing and totally dark. Suddenly, a perfectly healthy, highly energetic shiner drops directly into your zone. This shiner is extremely panicked. It is darting left, it is darting right. It is swimming rapidly in wide, unpredictable circles. You sit there and watch it. You track it slowly with your eyes. But every time you even think about opening your massive mouth to strike, the shiner darts 3 feet in the completely opposite direction. You simply do not have the burst speed to ambush it today. After a few half-hearted attempts, you give up completely. You sink back down into the soft mud and ignore it entirely. Meanwhile, the frustrated fisherman sitting up on the shore is wondering why he is not getting a bite. He has absolutely no idea that a trophy-sized fish is sitting right underneath his rig. The fish is incredibly hungry, but the presentation is physically impossible to catch. The illusion of the dancing bobber. You have probably experienced this exact frustrating situation before. You are sitting on the green bank closely watching your float. Suddenly, the brightly coloured bobber starts dancing around on the surface. It dips down half an inch. It moves 3 feet to the left. Then it abruptly darts 2 feet to the right. Your heart rate starts going up instantly. You grab the handle of your rod and get ready to set the heavy hook. You are absolutely convinced that a monster predator is aggressively playing with your bait. You wait patiently for the float to plunge completely under the water, but it never does. It just keeps dancing on the surface for 20 straight minutes. Finally, you reel it in to check your hook. Your bait is still there, swimming like an absolute champion. There was never a predator playing with your bait at all. The bobber was dancing because your live bait was terrified and swimming aggressively to escape. It was simply too lively. A tired spring predator would take one look at that erratic, fast-moving presentation and simply turn away in disgust. The surgical tail trimming trick. So how do we actually fix this massive problem? One of the easiest and most effective tricks is incredibly simple, but most people never even think to do it. You need to become a bit of a tiny surgeon on the water. Take a small pair of sharp fishing scissors and carefully trim the tail fin of your live bait. You do not want to cut the whole tail off entirely. You just want to slightly snip the very top and bottom forks of the back fin. This does something absolutely magical to your overall presentation. It instantly takes away the massive propulsion system of the bait. The fish can still swim. It is still fully alive. It is still breathing and creating a very subtle vibration in the water. But it can no longer dart away at top speed. It becomes physically handicapped. When a tired predator eventually approaches, the trimmed bait will desperately try to flee. But instead of shooting completely out of the strike zone, it will only wobble weakly in place. It looks exactly like a dying, struggling baitfish that has reached the absolute end of its life. To a lethargic spring fish, this is beautiful. Revealing the dying bait secret. Here is a massive secret that professional fishing guides know, but casual weekend fishermen almost never understand. The absolute best bait you can possibly use in the early spring is not the most active one. It is actually the specific bait that is struggling right on the edge of death. Go look deep in your bait bucket right now. Ignore all those frantic, splashing minnows at the top surface. Look very closely at the dark bottom of the bucket. You will probably see 1 or 2 minnows lying flat on their side, barely breathing. Every few seconds, they give a weak little kick to try and right themselves. Most regular people throw those ones straight into the garbage can. But you need to put that exact bait on your hook immediately. That weak, struggling action sends out a very specific acoustic signal into the freezing cold water. It is a biological distress signal. It loudly tells every tired predator in the area that an easy, completely defenseless meal is available. A big, lazy fish will gladly ignore 100 perfectly healthy minnows just to slowly swim over and eat the dying one. Changing your hook placement. Another brilliant way to permanently fix this speed problem is by simply changing how you put the bait onto the hook. Most of us were traditionally taught to hook a minnow very lightly directly through the top lips. This is a truly fantastic method for summer fishing because it allows the bait to swim freely and incredibly naturally. It keeps them totally alive for a very long time. But in the cold spring water, hooking them through the lips is actually working violently against you. It gives them far too much freedom to escape. Instead, try hooking them much deeper through the meaty part of their back, right behind the top dorsal fin. Do not be overly gentle. You want the heavy hook to act like a massive steel anchor. This deep placement physically restricts their entire body movement. It forces them to work twice as hard just to move half the regular distance. It slows them down completely naturally. They will basically sit in one tiny spot and thrash weakly. This creates a wonderful low-frequency vibration in the water without the awful erratic darting movement. Pinning the bait with heavy weights. If you absolutely do not want to alter the actual bait itself, you can easily alter your terminal tackle to achieve the exact same slow result. It is officially time to add some serious lead weight to your fishing line. A lot of modern anglers like to use very light split shots in the spring because they want a highly delicate presentation. But a light weight easily allows a lively minnow to drag your entire rig all over the bottom of the rocky lake. It can swim safely behind big rocks, hide deep in the green weeds, and constantly pull away from approaching hungry predators. Instead, tie on a very heavy sinker. Use a sinker that is entirely too heavy for the little bait to move at all. Pin that lively minnow directly firmly to the lake floor. Use a very short leader line, maybe only 4 or 5 inches long in total length. This severely limits the physical radius in which the bait can travel. It can kick and heavily panic all it wants, but it is stuck within a tiny 5-inch circle. It becomes a totally captive meal for any passing fish. Managing the temperature shock. There is another completely fascinating biological factor at play here, and it is called extreme temperature shock. Think deeply about the journey your bait takes. The clean water inside the aerated tanks at the local shop is usually quite warm and very comfortable. Then you put them in a plastic bucket and drive them inside your heated, warm truck. They are totally relaxed. But then you arrive at the frozen lake, hook them, and instantly plunge them into dark water that is barely above freezing. What do you think naturally happens? They absolutely panic. The sudden extreme shock of the freezing cold water sends them into a total wild frenzy. Their basic survival instinct kicks in, and they swim wildly, trying desperately to find warmer water. This panic phase can easily last for 10 to 15 minutes, and during this specific time, they are moving way too fast for a lazy predator to care. To solve this, you need to acclimate your bait incredibly slowly. Take some of the freezing lake water and slowly mix it into your bait bucket over the course of an entire hour. Analyzing the spring walleye behavior. Let us look very closely at a highly specific example using one of the most popular early-season fish, the moody and mighty walleye. Walleye are notoriously stubborn in the cold spring, especially during the immediate post-spawn recovery period. They have just gone through an incredibly exhausting reproductive cycle. The big females are totally drained of all their natural energy. They are sitting very close to the bottom mud in deep, cold water. Their huge eyes give them fantastic vision, but their physical desire to chase is absolutely zero. If you drop a highly energetic, violently thrashing shiner right over their heads, they will simply stare at it blankly. The fast movement might even spook them or irritate them enough to slowly swim away. But if you drop a heavily weighted, deeply hooked, barely struggling bait directly into their immediate strike zone, the reaction is completely different. The walleye does not even have to swim. It just has to slowly flare its gills and violently suck the water in. That weak, slow-moving bait gets inhaled instantly, targeting the resting northern pike. Now let us completely shift our focus to the aggressive northern pike. We always love to think of big pike as angry, toothy water wolves. We assume they are always fully ready to smash a fast-moving target with explosive speed. And in the hot middle of summer, that is absolutely a true statement. But early spring pike are a completely different animal altogether. They are very often hiding in extremely shallow, dark-bottomed muddy bays, trying desperately to soak up whatever tiny bit of warmth the afternoon sun provides. They are extremely lethargic. If you cast a frantic live bait right past a resting spring pike, it will probably just slowly blink its cold eyes. It takes way too much precious energy to fire up those huge muscles for a massive sprint. This is exactly why dead baiting is so incredibly universally popular for catching giant spring pike. A giant dead smelt, sitting completely motionless on the bottom mud, will catch far more trophy pike in early April than a panicked racing live bait ever will. It is all about giving them the easiest option. Dropping in on cold water bass. The exact same biological principles apply perfectly to cold water bass fishing as well. Early season largemouth and smallmouth bass are incredibly stubborn creatures. They hold very tight to heavy underwater cover, like sunken wooden logs or deep stone rock piles. They absolutely do not want to leave their safe, comfortable resting spots. If you cast a highly lively minnow out there, the minnow is going to swim absolutely everywhere. It is going to firmly pull your line far away from the log. It is going to drag your sharp hook totally out of the active strike zone. The lazy bass is simply not going to leave the tight cover to go chase it down in open water. You have to put the bait right directly on their nose and keep it parked there. This strictly means you need a bait that is barely moving at all. You want a sluggish, utterly lazy minnow that just slowly wobbles directly in front of the hidden bass. The bass will stare at it for a very long time. It might take 5 full minutes of staring before the fish finally decides to open its giant mouth. Breaking your own psychological barrier. One of the absolute hardest things about this entire slow fishing approach is breaking through your own mental psychological barrier. As passionate fishermen, we are naturally wired to want constant action. We want to feel things moving on the line. When we look at a highly lively bait kicking aggressively on the hook, it automatically gives us a deep sense of internal confidence. We feel like we are actively doing something incredibly right. Conversely, when we put a lazy, extremely slow, or completely half-dead bait on the line, it feels totally wrong. It feels like we are giving up on the day. It feels like we are using worthless garbage. You have to consciously, strongly fight this mental urge. You have to rigorously train your brain to understand that what looks good to your human eyes does not necessarily look good to a freezing cold fish. You are not trying to impress yourself. You are actively trying to feed a tired underwater creature. Trust the slow biological process entirely. Prioritizing scent over speed. When you finally completely remove extreme speed from the equation, you have to strictly rely on other natural sensory triggers to get the big fish to bite. In the terribly cold, murky water of the early spring, natural scent becomes vastly important. A frantic, perfectly healthy minnow darting around like crazy does not leave much of a scent trail at all. Its scales are sealed tight and it is moving way too fast. But a weak, deeply hooked or slightly heavily trimmed bait does something wonderful. It slowly leaks natural bodily fluids and strong scents directly into the surrounding dark water. Because the crippled bait is permanently pinned down or moving extremely slowly, that heavy scent creates a massively concentrated, powerful cloud in one very specific, targeted area. A lethargic monster predator does not even need to see the bait darting around to find it. It can literally smell the extreme vulnerability in the freezing water. The predator can slowly follow that thick scent trail right to the ultimate source. Comparing live meat to slow artificials. This entire concept actually perfectly explains why certain fake artificial lures can drastically outperform real live bait during the early season. Many regular guys get incredibly frustrated when they see someone actively catching huge fish on plastic rubber worms or extremely slow-moving lead jigs, while their terribly expensive live bait gets totally ignored. They simply cannot understand why a fish would prefer totally fake rubber over fresh, real meat. The ultimate answer is entirely about complete speed control. The knowledgeable guy using the artificial jig has total 100% absolute control over the movement. He can actively let that jig sit perfectly motionless on the bottom floor for 20 full seconds. He can give it one tiny, extremely subtle twitch. He is perfectly fully mimicking a nearly dead, lethargic piece of easy prey. Meanwhile, your completely terrified live bait is swimming 1,000,000 miles an hour and totally ruining the presentation. If you cannot slow down, go artificial. Mastering the game of extreme patience. Let us deeply talk about extreme patience and exact placement, because they completely go hand in hand with this slow bait strategy. When you finally purposefully get that perfectly weak, slowly moving bait safely on your hook, you absolutely need to change your actual fishing style. You cannot simply cast it out, wait 3 short minutes, reel it rapidly back in, and forcefully cast to a totally different spot. This constant aggressive recasting completely ruins the entire slow illusion. You deeply need to cast it safely to a high percentage target area, like a steep drop-off or a deep green weed edge, and then you firmly need to wait. You have to generously give the slow bait plenty of time to work. You have to give the terribly tired predators enough time to notice it, mentally process it, and slowly swim completely over to it. This might easily take 20 or 30 long minutes of doing absolutely nothing. Sit on your hands and let the painfully slow struggle ring the dinner bell. Reading the water for resting zones. You also critically need to become an absolute expert at closely reading the water to find exactly where these incredibly tired fish are resting. Because they are so lethargic, they are simply not going to be sitting in the heavy moving current. They are absolutely not going to be actively chasing bait balls in the open, windy, rough water. They are absolutely going to strongly seek out the calmest, warmest, and most quiet pockets of water they can possibly find. Look carefully for very slow-moving eddies positioned safely behind large underwater rocks. Look deeply for dark, muddy, shallow bays that heat up slightly in the bright afternoon sun. Look specifically for deep, dark holes where the heavy water barely moves at all. Once you effectively find these completely dead zones, that is exactly where you strictly want to drop your incredibly slow, restricted bait. You are matching the exact low energy of the environment perfectly. A fast, erratic minnow in a silent pool looks totally unnatural. Putting the ultimate strategy together. So let us finally put all of these critical missing pieces totally together into one extremely powerful strategy for your next trip. You proudly arrive at the freezing cold lake very early in the morning. You gaze inside your plastic bucket and you totally willfully ignore the chaotic, wildly jumping minnows. You reach down deeply and purposefully grab the absolutely slowest, weakest bait you can possibly find. You deeply hook it straight through the thick meat of the back to severely restrict its swimming movement, or you carefully precisely trim its top tail fins to purposefully slow it down. You heavily add a large lead weight to forcefully pin it directly to the bottom floor so it totally cannot run away. You gently drop it perfectly into a wonderfully quiet, completely calm resting area where incredibly tired predators are simply trying to actively conserve their energy. And then you wait incredibly patiently. You have adapted perfectly. You are going to catch the massive fish. The ultimate paradox of early spring fishing is that the absolute worst-looking bait in your entire bucket is usually the absolute best bait you can put on your hook. We have been conditioned for many years to firmly believe that maximum chaotic energy equals maximum fishing results. But today, we completely shattered that old, outdated way of thinking. The undeniable truth is that dropping a frantic, terrified minnow directly in front of a freezing, totally exhausted predator is a guaranteed recipe for massive failure. By slowing things way down, forcefully restricting the movement, and totally embracing the dying struggle, you are finally actively giving the big fish exactly what they deeply want. An easy, high-calorie meal that requires absolutely zero effort to catch. This simple mental shift in your mindset will completely change the way you approach the early spring season forever. It will wonderfully turn totally empty trips into absolutely unforgettable days on the water. Thank you so much for watching this video and taking the precious time to learn this incredible, game-changing strategy. If you found this information highly useful, please make sure to actively subscribe to the channel and leave a huge like on this video. Now, head directly down to the comment section and let me know. Have you ever successfully caught a massive monster fish using a totally half-dead minnow? Or do you still stubbornly swear by the absolute liveliest bait in the tank? Let us talk all about it right down below.